The rifle barrel pointed at her chest didn't make Margie Hernandez's hands shake. The staff at Mercy General's pediatric ICU had worked alongside the quiet night nurse for 2 years, watching her change dressings and whisper to frightened children. They thought her steady hands came from nursing school. They thought her ability to work under pressure was just professionalism. They had never seen the scars hidden beneath her sleeves or understood why she always knew where the exits were. When the armed man stepped off the elevator at 2:47 a.m. hunting a Mafia boss's 7-year-old son, he saw a helpless woman in scrubs. He didn't see the decorated Army Ranger who'd survived 3 combat tours. He thought he was in control. He'd just made a fatal miscalculation. Before we go any further, if this story already touched your heart, please tap the subscribe button right now. These stories take time, care, and love to create, and your support truly keeps them alive. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing this little storytelling family is spread all over the world. Don't be the quiet one who enjoys and disappears. Stay with us. You know that moment when your body remembers something your mind's been trying to forget? That's what happened to Margie when the elevator doors opened at 2:47 in the morning. She was doing what she always did, carrying medication trays, checking on sleeping babies, moving through the pediatric ward like a shadow so she wouldn't wake anyone. The night shift at Mercy General was supposed to be peaceful. Quiet vitals checks, whispered conversations with worried parents who couldn't sleep. The gentle beep of monitors keeping watch over children fighting their own private battles. Then she heard it. Click, snap. A rifle safety. Her hands were setting down the medication tray before she even registered what she was doing. Her weight shifted. Her eyes swept the hallway. Supply closet left, crash cart right, exits at both ends. 15 rooms. 15 children. 3 on ventilators who couldn't be moved quickly. The calculations happened automatically, like her body was speaking a language she'd spent 2 years trying to unlearn. The elevator doors slid open. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing dark clothes and tactical boots, and he was carrying an AR-15 like some men carry briefcases, casually, like it belonged in his hands. His eyes were cold as he scanned the children's ward, and Margie knew immediately this wasn't some desperate addict looking for drugs. This was someone who'd come here to kill. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her hands stayed steady on the counter. Be small, she told herself. Be the quiet nurse. Be harmless. Sir? Her voice came out soft, uncertain. Visiting hours don't start until 8. Where's the Korean's kid? Russian accent. The rifle swung toward her, and every instinct in her body screamed to move, to create distance, to react. She forced herself to stay still. Behind her, she heard Teresa shuffling papers at the nurse's station. Dear Teresa, who brought homemade lumpia every Friday and talked about her grandchildren like they'd hung the moon. Teresa, who'd probably never seen a gun outside of television. I don't know what you mean, Margie said, making her voice shake, making herself smaller, less threatening. Everything she'd learned to be in the 2 years since she'd traded her combat uniform for scrubs. The boy. Surgery 3 days ago. Korean father. He stepped fully into the corridor now, and the fluorescent lights caught the hard angles of his face. Which room? Margie's mind split in 2 directions. Part of her was cataloging details like she was back in Kandahar, weapon modifications, magazine capacity, stance assessment, probable exit routes. The other part was screaming because she knew exactly who he meant. Little Kijun Min in room 304, still recovering from his appendectomy, clutching the stuffed rabbit his father had brought him. 7 years old. Just 7. "Sir, please lower the weapon." That was Teresa's voice, trembling but trying so hard to be brave, and Margie's stomach dropped. "No, please don't. Please just stay quiet." The rifle swung toward Teresa. "Don't." The word came out harder than Margie intended, and the man's attention snapped back to her. She softened immediately, raised her hands. "Please. She's just frightened. We both are. Just tell us what you need." 12 feet separated them. Margie measured it automatically. 2.5 seconds at a sprint, maybe 1 if she used the crash cart for momentum. But not with Teresa exposed. Not with 15 babies sleeping behind those thin doors. The man studied her like he was deciding whether she was worth the bullet. "The Korean's son," he said slowly. "I know he's here. So you take me to him now, or I start opening doors?" He gestured with the rifle toward room 301. Toward Emma Chen. 4 years old, 2 days post-lung transplant. Something cold settled into Margie's chest. Something she'd buried deep 2 years ago, under medication schedules and gentle bedside manner, and the carefully constructed fiction that she was just a nurse. Just a nurse. "Room 304, she heard herself say. "I'll take you there." Room 304 was at the end of the hall, past the medication dispensary and the supply closet, and 12 other rooms filled with sleeping children who had no idea that death had just stepped off the elevator. Margie walked slowly, keeping her hands visible, keeping her breathing steady even though her heart was trying to hammer its way out of her chest. Behind her, she could hear Volkov's boots on the linoleum, heavy, confident steps that didn't belong in a place where parents whispered and nurses moved on soft soles. "Stop." His voice was flat. "Here, nurse station." Margie stopped, turned slowly. Volkov had positioned himself with his back to the wall, rifle trained on the corridor where he could see both exits. Smart. Not military smart, but smart enough. Behind the desk, Teresa had gone pale, her hands clutched together like she was praying. "Both of you, behind the desk. Now." He gestured with the rifle, and Margie moved to comply, her mind already working through possibilities. The medication dispensary had a panic button. The phone system connected directly to security. But both required getting past him, and both would take precious seconds she might not have. "Please," Teresa whispered as Margie slid behind the desk beside her. "Please, we have children here. Sick children." "I know." Volkov's smile was cold. "That's why you're going to tell me which room has the Korean's boy. Because if you don't, I start with the closest door and work my way down." Margie felt Teresa's hand find hers under the desk, squeezing tight. Teresa, who had 3 grandchildren. Teresa, who'd worked this ward for 20 years and knew every child's name, every parent's story, every small victory and heartbreak. "We don't," Teresa started, and Volkov raised the rifle toward room 301. "Last chance." Margie's mouth went dry. Room 301. Emma Chen, 4 years old, 2 days post-lung transplant. Her mother was sleeping in the chair beside her bed, exhausted from nights of keeping vigil. Emma, who'd drawn Margie a picture of a rainbow yesterday with shaking hands, so proud of herself for sitting up. "Wait." The word came out before Margie could stop it. "Just wait." Volkov's eyes fixed on her, and she saw something flicker there, impatience maybe, or satisfaction that someone was finally being reasonable. "You know which room." It wasn't a question. Margie felt the weight of it settling onto her shoulders. She'd made hard choices before, in dusty compounds in Afghanistan, in firefights where every decision meant someone lived or died. But those had been combatants, soldiers, people who'd chosen to be there. Ki-jun Min was 7 years old. He hadn't chosen his father, hadn't chosen to be born into violence. But neither had Emma Chen chosen to need new lungs. Neither had Marcus Williams in 306 chosen to have leukemia, or baby Sophia in 309 chosen to be born 3 months early. His name is Ki-jun, Margie heard herself say quietly. He's 7. He had his appendix out 3 days ago. He's scared of the dark, so we leave his bathroom light on. He likes grape juice boxes, and his stuffed rabbit is named Mr. Hoppy. Teresa's hand tightened on hers. Volkov's expression didn't change. Room number. Why? Margie kept her voice soft, but something in her tone made Volkov's eyes narrow. He's a child. Whatever his father did, his father is Nam Ki-jun. Volkov said the name like a curse. You know what that means? The Korean butcher. He killed my brother, my nephew. He burned down my uncle's restaurant with people inside. And this boy burned down your restaurant? Margie asked quietly. This 7-year-old who cries when we change his bandages. His father needs to learn. Volkov's finger moved to the trigger. Room number, or I start making you learn instead. He turned the rifle toward Teresa. Time slowed down. Margie saw it all at once. Teresa's terrified eyes, the distance to Volkov, the crash cart between them, the phone just out of reach. She saw the futures branching out. Refuse and watch him execute Teresa, then Emma, then Marcus, working his way through the ward until someone broke. Give him the room number, and live with knowing she'd handed a child over to his executioner. Or option 3. The one that meant Staff Sergeant Hernandez stopped hiding. Room 304, Margie said. End of the hall. But his father stationed guards. 2 of them, armed. You walk down there, you're walking into an ambush. Volkov's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Why would I lie? Margie kept her voice steady. You think a mob boss leaves his son unprotected in a hospital? There's a reason I'm telling you. Maybe those guards shoot you. Maybe this ends without any children dying. She watched him calculate, saw the doubt creep in. Show me, he finally said. You walk ahead. We check together. Margie stood slowly, and Teresa's hand slipped from hers. Margie, Teresa whispered. Don't. But Margie was already moving, already thinking 3 steps ahead, getting him away from the nurse's station, away from the sleeping children, down that hallway where there were supply closets and medication rooms and a dozen places where a trained soldier could turn the tables. She just had to keep being the harmless nurse a little bit longer. Margie led him down the corridor, moving slowly, keeping her hands visible. Every step was calculated, even though she made it look like fear. She was talking the whole time. Soft, nervous chatter that made her seem harmless. Room 304 is just down here. Please, sir, the children are sleeping. Some of them are very sick. If we could just... Shut up and walk. She nodded, ducking her head like she'd been scolded. But her eyes were mapping everything. The crash cart outside room 299. She angled slightly left as she passed it, her hip bumping it just enough to roll it a few inches into the corridor. Not obvious, just repositioning. Sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, I'm just nervous. The man grunted, his attention fixed on the room numbers. 298, 300, 302. Margie's hand trailed along the wall as they walked, and her fingers found the emergency exit release panel. She pressed it as she passed, heard the soft click of the magnetic lock disengaging. The door to the south stairwell would open now with just a push. No alarms. No delays. These children, she said quietly, some of them are on ventilators. If there's any loud noise, Any disruption. I said shut up. They were passing the medication room when she saw him. Dr. Patel, the new resident, maybe 28 years old, stepping out with a chart in his hands. He looked up and froze when he saw the rifle. His face went white. The chart slipped from his fingers. Oh my God! Hey! The gunman swung the rifle toward him, and Margie saw Patel's whole body start to shake, saw his knees actually buckle. This boy was going to get himself killed. It's okay, Margie said quickly, stepping between them, her hands raised. He's just a resident. He's just a doctor. He's nobody. Get him over here, now. Patel was backing away, his breath coming in short gasps. Panic attack. Maybe 30 seconds before he started hyperventilating, made a sound, drew more attention. Margie could see his eyes darting toward the nurse's station where Teresa was still frozen, toward the patient rooms where children were sleeping. He was going to run, or scream, or do something stupid and brave that would get people killed. To Patel, Margie's voice changed. Not loud, but different. The softness stripped away, leaving something underneath that had sharp edges. Look at me. His eyes snapped to hers. Come here. Walk slowly. Hands where he can see them. Patel stumbled forward, trembling so hard his ID badge was rattling against his chest. When he got close enough, Margie grabbed his arm, gentle on the outside, but her fingers found the pressure point just above his elbow. An old trick for controlling detainees. He gasped and went still. She leaned in close, like she was comforting him. To the gunman, it probably looked like the scared nurse was steadying the terrified doctor, but her mouth was at Patel's ear, and when she spoke, it was in the voice she hadn't used in 2 years. Command voice, the one that had moved soldiers through firefights. Listen carefully. You're going to go to the nurse's station. You're going to tell Teresa to call a code silver, but quietly. No overhead page. Then you're going to start moving every ambulatory patient to the south stairwell. The exit is unlocked. Room 297, 299, 301, 303, 305. Those kids can walk or be carried. Get them out. I can't. I don't. Yes, you can. Her grip tightened. You're going to move fast and quiet, like you're doing rounds. If anyone asks, you're consolidating patients for the night shift. Can you do that? Patel's eyes were huge, but something in her voice must have reached him because he nodded. What about you? He whispered. Margie glanced back at the gunman, who was watching them with growing impatience. She released Patel's arm and gave him a small push toward the nurse's station. I'm buying you time. Now go. Move it, the gunman barked, gesturing with the rifle. 304. No. Margie turned back to him, her shoulders hunched again, hands raised. I'm sorry, he was scared. We're almost there. But as she led him past room 302, she bumped another crash cart, angling it across the corridor. Creating obstacles, creating barriers. When this went bad, and it was going to go bad, she needed every advantage she could build. Behind her, she heard Patel's footsteps moving quickly toward the nurse's station. Heard his whispered voice. Good. The children were being moved. That was something. Room 304 was just ahead now, and through the small window in the door, Margie could see the sleeping shape of Kijun Min, his stuffed rabbit clutched against his chest. I will never leave a fallen comrade. The Ranger Creed. She'd sworn it once, in another life. Looked like she was about to find out if she still meant it. Margie led him down the corridor with her hands visible, her steps small and careful, like a woman who knew better than to make sudden moves around armed men. Inside, Staff Sergeant Hernandez was counting seconds, measuring distances, waiting for the opening that would come. It always came. You just had to be patient. I need to check the patient roster, she said softly, gesturing toward the nurse's station. Make sure I have the right room number. The computers update every shift, and I don't want to. You said 304. His voice was flat, suspicious. I know, but we moved some children yesterday because of the construction on the south wing, and if I take you to the wrong room... She let her voice trail off, let him see the fear she didn't have to fake. The fear for what he'd do if she wasted his time. He jerked his head toward the station. Make it fast. Teresa had disappeared. Smart woman, probably already hitting the emergency call button in the break room. Margie moved behind the counter, her fingers trembling just enough as she reached for the keyboard. The medication dispensary was 18 inches to her left. Above it, mounted near the ceiling, was the oxygen monitoring panel with its bright red emergency shutoff. She'd walked past it 500 times in 2 years. Never touched it. Never needed to. Her fingers flew across the keyboard like she was pulling up patient files, but her left hand drifted up, casual as brushing hair from her face, and found the emergency oxygen shutoff valve. Hurry up, Volkov growled. Almost there, She twisted the valve hard to the right. The alarm was immediate and deafening, a piercing wail that filled every corner of the pediatric ward, accompanied by flashing red lights and the automated voice. Oxygen system failure. Oxygen system failure. Evacuate patients immediately. Volkov's head snapped toward the sound, and Margie moved. 2 years of forcing herself to be gentle, to move slowly, to telegraph every motion so she wouldn't startle the children. All of it disappeared in half a heartbeat. The surgical shears were in her hand, the ones she'd clipped to her scrub pocket that morning out of habit. She closed the distance as Volkov turned back, his rifle swinging up, and she went low like she'd done 100 times in training. The shears bit through the rifle sling in one clean cut. His weight shifted as the weapon dropped, and Margie's other hand came up in a strike her instructor would have been proud of, heel of palm to the soft part of his wrist, right where the nerves clustered. Not hard enough to break bone, just hard enough to make his hand forget how to hold things. The AR-15 clattered to the floor. Volkov roared and swung at her, but she was already moving, already transitioning. His fist caught air where her head had been. She swept his leg. Textbook technique. The kind that looks easy when you've done it 1,000 times. And he went down hard. The rifle discharged as he fell, his finger spasming on the trigger. The shot went wild, punching a hole in the acoustic ceiling tile. Plaster dust rained down like snow. Down the hallway, doors were opening. Staff appearing, confused and frightened by the alarms. Dr. Ramesh from the resident room, 2 surgical nurses from the break area. Even Frank, the night janitor, with his mop still in hand. Get them out. Margie's voice came out like a command, like something from a different life. Move the ambulatory patients now, south stairwell. They stared at her. Quiet Margie, soft-spoken Margie, standing over an armed man with surgical shears in her hand like a weapon. Now! They moved. Volkov was scrambling for the rifle, blood streaming from where he'd bitten his tongue in the fall. Margie kicked it away, sent it skittering toward the medication room, and planted herself between him and the children's rooms. Behind her, she heard the organized chaos of evacuation. Wheels squeaking, urgent voices calling room numbers, the staff doing exactly what they'd trained for, moving children toward safety. But not all of them could move. Margie! It was Teresa's voice, panicked from room 308. Margie, I can't. Emma's on the ventilator, and Lucas in 306, and 5 children, 5 babies too sick to evacuate quickly, too fragile to rush. Volkov looked up at her, wiping blood from his mouth, and smiled. The supply corridor was darker than the main hallway, just emergency lighting casting everything in that sickly green glow that makes hospitals feel like the land of the dead at 3 a.m. Margie watched Volkov stumble through the door, his left hand pressed against his shoulder where she'd driven the surgical shears deep enough to make him drop the rifle. But he still had his sidearm. She'd seen the Glock holstered at his hip. Teresa was getting the children out. The ambulatory ones first, then the crash team would handle the ventilator kids. 15 lives moving toward safety because Margie had bought them time. Now she had to finish this. She slipped through the supply room door and let it close behind her, with barely a whisper. The old Margie, Nurse Hernandez, would have called security and locked herself in a medication room until the professionals arrived. But Staff Sergeant Hernandez knew better. Wounded men were the most dangerous. Cornered men fought like animals. And this man had already proven he'd kill children to make a point. She couldn't let him leave this corridor. Her eyes adjusted to the dimness. Shelves of medical supplies stretched toward the back where the corridor branched into storage rooms and the old radiology suite they didn't use anymore. Blood drops on the linoleum told her which way he'd gone. Margie grabbed an IV pole, testing its weight. Aluminum, hollow core, about 5 feet long. Not ideal, but she'd trained with worse. In Kandahar, she'd once taken down a Taliban fighter with a tent stake and pure determination. She moved forward, keeping her footsteps light, her breathing controlled. The blood trail led left toward the old supply rooms. Smart. He was looking for a place to regroup, maybe bandage that shoulder. Give himself time to think. She wasn't going to give him that time. At the junction, she paused, listened. There, shallow breathing, maybe 20 feet ahead. Second door on the right. She could picture the layout, shelving units, boxes of gloves and gowns, probably a rolling cart or two. Margie crouched and pulled a package of catheter tubing from the nearest shelf. The thin, flexible plastic was designed to carry fluids into veins, but it made excellent tripwire. She strung it across the doorway at ankle height, secured it to a shelf bracket on one side and a cartwheel on the other. Nearly invisible in this light. Then she grabbed an aerosol can of disinfectant, the industrial kind they used for deep cleaning. Flammable, very flammable. She'd seen field medics use similar tricks in Afghanistan when they needed to clear caves. "I know you're hurting," she called out, her voice echoing slightly. "That shoulder's bleeding pretty good. You've got maybe 20 minutes before you go into shock." Silence. Then, "You're not a normal nurse." His accent was thicker now, pain making him careless with his words. Good. Pain made people sloppy. "No," Margie agreed. "I'm not." She heard movement. He was shifting position, trying to get a sight line. She stayed low, using the shelving units as cover. Her hand found her pocket lighter, the one she carried for the parents who still smoked, despite their children fighting for breath upstairs. "The Korean son," Volkov said. "He needs to die. You understand? His father—" "He's 7 years old," Margie cut him off. "And right now I don't care who his father is." Movement in the shadows. She saw the muzzle flash before she heard the shot. Volkov firing blind, hoping to get lucky. The bullet punched through a box of gauze 6 inches from her head. Margie moved. She rolled left, came up throwing. The IV pole sailed through the doorway like a spear, and she heard it connect. Metal on bone, a satisfying crack. Volkov cursed in Russian. She was already moving again, circling wide, using the shelving units. He fired twice more, both shots wild. The muzzle flashes gave away his position. backed against the far wall, right where she'd expected, right where she'd wanted him. Margie grabbed the aerosol can, flicked her lighter, and stepped into the doorway. She pressed the nozzle and held the flame in front of it. The makeshift flamethrower lit up the room like daylight. Volkov screamed and dove sideways, his jacket catching fire. The tripwire caught his ankle and he went down hard, the Glock skittering across the floor. Margie was on him before he could recover, her knee in his spine, her hands already reaching for the pressure points she'd memorized a lifetime ago. "Stay down," she said quietly, "or I'll make sure that shoulder's the least of your problems." Margie had Volkov pinned in the supply corridor, his rifle kicked 15 feet down the hall when she heard the stairwell door slam open behind her. New footsteps. Multiple. Fast and purposeful. Her body wanted to turn, to assess the new threat, but she couldn't take her eyes off Volkov. He was clutching his wounded hand against his chest, breathing hard, but he wasn't done. Men like him were never done until they were unconscious or dead. "Nobody move." The voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of calm that comes from men who don't need to shout because they know they'll be obeyed. Margie risked a glance over her shoulder. 4 men. 3 in dark suits with that particular stillness that screamed private security, hands resting on concealed weapons. And in front of them, a man in an expensive wool coat, silver threading through his black hair. His face was the kind you'd pass on the street without noticing. Deliberately unremarkable, but his eyes were winter itself. Nam Ki-jun. She knew him from the visitor logs, from the careful distance he kept during visiting hours, from the way even the hospital administrators got nervous when his name appeared on forms. "You," Ki-jun said, looking at Volkov. Not angry, just factual, like he was identifying a problem that needed solving. Then his gaze shifted to Margie, still in her blood-spattered scrubs, surgical shears gripped in her hand like a weapon. "And you." This was bad. This was 2 armed groups in a children's hospital, and Margie was standing right in the middle with 5 kids still trapped on this floor. "Mr. Ki-jun." She kept her voice steady, the way she'd learned to speak to officers who outranked her. Respectful, but firm. "Your son is safe. Room 304, doors locked from the inside. Nurse Rodriguez is with him. But I need you to... I know where my son is." Ki-jun's English was perfect, barely accented. "I also know this man came here to kill him." One of the guards moved forward, reaching inside his jacket. Volkov tried to scramble backward despite his injuries. "Stop!" Margie didn't shout it. Didn't need to. Something in her voice made them all freeze. The same tone she'd used on green soldiers about to do something catastrophically stupid in a firefight. "There are children on this floor. Sick children. You want to solve your problems, you take it outside." Ki-jun studied her with those cold, calculating eyes. "You're the night nurse, Margaret Hernandez." "That's right. You protected my son." "I protected all the children under my care." She met his gaze directly. "That's my job." A thin smile touched his lips. Not warmth, exactly, more like recognition, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "Your job." "Yes. Tell me, Nurse Hernandez, is it part of your job to disarm a man twice your size? To clear a hostile floor using medical equipment as weapons?" Her jaw tightened. Behind her, she could hear Volkov's labored breathing, could feel the weight of 3 armed guards waiting for their boss's signal. "It's my job to keep my patients alive." She kept her voice level. "Right now, I have 5 children who need to be evacuated. Emma Chen in 301, ventilator dependent. The Morrison twins in 308, both post-surgical. Your son. and Michael Torres in 310, just 8 years old, fighting leukemia. My men can escort them. No. The word came out harder than she intended. No guns near those children. Not yours, not his, not anyone's. Kijun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. You're giving me orders. I'm telling you what needs to happen. Margie's hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with her. You want your son safe? You want him to look at you without seeing violence and blood and everything that came here tonight? Then you help me get these kids out cleanly. The silence stretched long enough that Margie could hear her own heartbeat, could count the seconds ticking past while 5 children waited in locked rooms, probably terrified by all the noise. Finally, Kijun nodded once. Sharp. Decisive. Temporary ceasefire, he said, though his eyes never left Volkov. Your children first. Then we discuss other matters. He made it sound like a negotiation, like he was doing her a favor. Margie didn't care about his pride or his power plays. She only cared that he'd said yes. Your men stay in the corridor, visible, no weapons drawn. She was already moving toward room 301. I'll evacuate them one at a time. Rodriguez brings your son out last, after the others are clear. Agreed. Kijun's voice followed her. But Nurse Hernandez, when the children are safe, we will talk. It sounded like a promise. Or maybe a threat. Margie didn't look back. Margie kept her hand light on the rifleman's sleeve as she guided him down the corridor, her posture slightly hunched, her steps hesitant, the picture of a frightened nurse doing exactly what she was told. Inside, everything was moving at a different speed. The hospital was beginning to tighten around them, doors magnetizing, elevators freezing between floors. Somewhere outside, security had already made the call. Police first, then SWAT. The clock was ticking now, whether the man realized it or not. Room 304 waited at the far end of the hall. Almost there, Margie murmured, pitching her voice thin and nervous. She slowed him just enough to buy seconds. Seconds mattered. As they passed the linen alcove, her fingers brushed the edge of a cart stacked with bundled sheets. She let one bundle slide free and tumble to the floor. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, bending quickly to scoop it up. The man cursed under his breath, shifting his grip on the rifle. In that half-second of distraction, Margie slipped her thumb beneath the elastic strap of her watch and snapped it loose. The face slid into her palm and disappeared into the folded sheet. A silent timer. Improvised. They reached the door. Open it. Margie hesitated just long enough to let her breathing shake. He's sleeping. Please don't scare him. The man shoved past her. The room was empty. The bed was stripped. The monitors unplugged. The stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the pillow like a shed skin. Confusion cracked his certainty. That was all she needed. Margie drove her elbow into the base of his jaw as she pivoted, slammed her shoulder into his weapon arm, and redirected the barrel into the door frame as the rifle discharged with a deafening crack. Plaster exploded. She followed with a knee into his thigh, ripping the rifle free as they crashed to the floor. She didn't linger. She slammed the door shut, twisted the emergency lock, dragged a crash cart across the threshold, and wedged it tight. Teresa, she snapped into the shoulder mic she'd lifted earlier. Go. Now. Laundry access. She was already moving. Steam filled the laundry room. Warm and metallic. Industrial machines rumbled like restless engines. The chute yawned open, a dark vertical throat dropping 6 floors into the service corridor below. 2 orderlies stared at her. "We're evacuating through here," she said. "I need surgical tubing, IV poles, every gurney you can move. Now." They moved because her voice left no room for argument. Her hands flew as she anchored tubing into a crude pulley, triple wrapping knots that bit into steel rails. Weight calculations ran automatically. Child plus gurney plus equipment, descent speed, friction limits. Vent kids first, 1 at a time, slow feed. The first gurney tipped into the chute, the tubing singing under load. Margie controlled the descent inch by inch, muscles burning, eyes locked on the line. It felt like cargo drops in hostile valleys. The same math, the same pressure, only now the cargo breathed and trusted her. 1 down. Another. Sweat soaked her collar. Her forearms trembled, but her grip never failed. Between runs, she sprinted to the corridor. Muffled pounding shook the door to 304. The man was screaming now, rage bleeding through metal. She ignored him. Third gurney. 4th. A distant boom rattled the ceiling tiles. "Faster," someone whispered. "Steady," Margie said. "Fast breaks things." The final ventilator rolled forward, tiny chest rising beneath clear tubing, lashes fluttering in sleep. Margie swallowed as she guided the descent herself. Fingers numb, shoulders screaming, every inch controlled. When the line went slack, relief hit so hard her knees nearly buckled. "Clear the chute. Service exit. Keep low." Only then did she allow herself 1 breath. The pounding behind the locked door had stopped. That wasn't relief. That was worse. Margie wiped her hands on her scrubs and turned back toward the corridor, her spine straightening, her softness falling away like discarded skin. Extraction was complete. Margie moved down the corridor toward room 304 without running, her footsteps measured, her breathing steady. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright, too clean for what waited ahead. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burned plaster from the earlier shot. The crash cart still blocked the door. The metal was dented where something heavy had slammed into it from the other side. She slid it aside. The door burst inward before her hand reached the handle. Volkov lunged into the hallway with the rifle raised, his face flushed with fury, eyes wild and shining. His finger tightened on the trigger. Margie didn't hesitate. She stepped inside the arc of the barrel, slapped the rifle aside with the heel of her palm, and drove forward into his space before he could recover. The muzzle barked once, the round punching harmlessly into the ceiling tiles as she twisted the weapon free and sent it skidding down the corridor. They crashed into the wall together. His elbow clipped her shoulder. Pain flared white-hot, but she used it, pivoting her hips and dumping his weight into the floor. He was strong. Stronger than she'd expected. He clawed for her throat, breath hot and ragged, teeth bared like an animal cornered. "Where is the boy?" he snarled. "Safe," she said, and meant it. His knee slammed into her ribs. The impact stole a fraction of her air. Old instincts surged, sharp and hungry, whispering efficient solutions. End it. Finish it. Neutralize the threat permanently. For a heartbeat, she felt the familiar clarity of lethal intent settle into her bones. And she recoiled from it. She trapped his wrist as he reached for a concealed blade, twisted until tendons screamed, and drove her weight through his centerline, snapping his balance. He howled as his wrist gave way with a wet crack, the knife clattering across the floor. He swung his free arm wildly. She ducked beneath it, stepped inside his guard, and delivered a precise upward strike beneath his collarbone. The bone fractured with a hollow, sickening pop. His arm collapsed uselessly against his chest. Volkov staggered back, shock and pain hollowing his face. Margie stayed close, controlling distance, her movements economical and clean. Not rage, not vengeance. Discipline. Precision. The difference mattered. "You could have killed me," he gasped, swaying. "I know," she said. The hallway echoed with distant shouting now, boots pounding stairwells, commands barked through radios, the building finally breathing again as law enforcement flooded in. Volkov's eyes flicked toward the noise, calculation returning through the pain. "They will shoot me," he said. "Better I die here." A voice answered from behind her, smooth and cold. "Or I can handle it." Margie didn't turn. She didn't need to. Kijun stood at the far end of the corridor, framed by the harsh light, his expression unreadable, his presence radiating the quiet authority of a man accustomed to ending problems permanently. 2 armed security men hovered just behind him, their weapons low but ready. Execution. Clean. Simple. Final. Margie felt the weight of the choice settle into her chest like a stone. If Kijun pulled the trigger, the threat would vanish forever. No trials, no revenge attempts, no loose ends. And she would become complicit in the same kind of quiet killing she'd spent 2 years trying to escape. "No," she said. Kijun's gaze sharpened. "He came for my son." "I know. He will come again." "He won't," Margie said, tightening her grip on Volkov's ruined wrist as he sagged. "He's finished." Kijun studied her for a long moment, measuring something deeper than tactics. "You're asking me to trust the system." "I'm asking you to trust me." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Volkov groaned softly, blood spotting his sleeve, his breath shallow and uneven. Sirens wailed closer now. Footsteps thundered toward them. Finally, Kijun gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well." He gestured his men back. Margie exhaled slowly, tension draining from her spine in controlled increments. She guided Volkov down to his knees, keeping pressure on his injured arm, positioning him safely for custody. Red and blue light began to pulse against the sterile walls. As officers surged into the corridor, weapons raised, Margie stepped back, lifting her hands, her breathing steady once more. Volkov was alive. And so was the woman she was still fighting to remain. Gray light crept through the narrow windows of the staff lounge, softening the harsh fluorescent glare that had ruled the night. Dawn had a way of making everything feel smaller, the fear, the noise, the violence, like the world was quietly reminding itself that it still knew how to begin again. So the pediatric floor was finally silent. No shouted commands, no heavy boots thundering down corridors, just the distant hum of cleaning machines and the muted voices of officers finishing reports behind closed doors. SWAT had cleared the building an hour ago. The gunman led away in cuffs, his fury reduced to paperwork and evidence bags. Margie sat alone at the break room table, her back against the wall, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee cradled between both hands. Now that the danger had passed, the adrenaline had nowhere to go. Her fingers trembled no matter how tightly she curled them around the cup. Her jaw ached from clenching. Her shoulders felt like they'd been carrying a mountain. She let it happen. The shaking. The quiet release. She'd learned long ago that fighting the crash only made it worse. Footsteps paused at the doorway. She looked up. Nam Kijun stood there in a dark coat that looked far too expensive for a hospital corridor. His hair was neatly styled despite the chaos of the night, his face composed in that careful way powerful men wore like armor. Only his eyes betrayed him, red-rimmed, exhausted, grateful in a way that didn't know how to soften itself. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the empty chair. Margie nodded. He sat, setting a thick envelope on the table between them. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. "For saving my son," he said quietly. "For saving all of them." Margie didn't touch the envelope. "I can't take that." "It is nothing to me," he said, "and it is everything to you." She finally met his gaze. "That's exactly why I won't." He studied her for a moment, something like confusion crossing his features. Men like him were used to money opening doors, smoothing guilt, buying silence and gratitude in neat, transactional lines. "You could have walked away," he said. "You didn't. You could have protected yourself. You chose the children instead. Tell me, what are you?" The question wasn't threatening. It was genuinely curious, almost reverent. Margie felt the weight of the night settle behind her eyes, the chute rope burning her palms, the rifle's recoil shuddering through her bones, Teresa's frightened face, the soft rise and fall of ventilated chests disappearing into darkness. She answered simply. "A nurse." Keegan searched her face, then gave a slow nod, as if accepting a truth he couldn't fully understand. He pushed the envelope back toward himself and stood. "If you ever need anything," he said. "I won't," Margie replied gently. He hesitated, then inclined his head in something that resembled respect before walking away. The door swung closed behind him. Margie exhaled. A moment later, Teresa peeked in, followed by 2 other nurses and a respiratory tech. Their expressions were different now. Not just relief, not just curiosity, but something steadier. Something like awe mixed with trust. "You okay?" Teresa asked softly. Margie nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Teresa stepped forward and wrapped her in a careful hug. "You scared the life out of me," she whispered. "And you saved it too." Warmth pressed unexpectedly against Margie's chest, tight and unfamiliar. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to be seen. Later that morning, administration called her in. The charge nurse and a hospital director sat across from her, voices formal but eyes bright with something close to admiration. They offered her the charge nurse position on nights. Leadership, authority, visibility. The old reflex rose immediately, deflect, decline, disappear back into the quiet margins where ghosts could stay hidden and safe. But something had shifted. Margie thought about the children being wheeled into sunlight, about Teresa's hug, about the way her hands had steadied instead of shattered when everything mattered most. She wasn't hiding anymore. "I'd be honored," she said. When she stepped back onto the floor, sunlight spilled across the polished linoleum, warm and real. Nurses nodded to her differently now. Not with distance, with confidence, with quiet pride. Margie adjusted her badge, squared her shoulders, and walked forward, not as penance, not as punishment for who she used to be, but as purpose for who she had become. A nurse. And a warrior. At last, she no longer needed to choose. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the loudest in the room. Sometimes courage looks like steady hands, quiet choices, and doing the right thing when no one is watching. This story reminds us that your past doesn't define your future. It prepares you for it. That leadership isn't about power, but responsibility. And that purpose is found when you stop hiding who you really are and start using it to protect others. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see strength a little differently, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching.